Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
It is Friday, and every Friday we are chatting with Chris Fitzsimon, who does the Stories from the States podcast. That is a podcast that the States Newsroom organization puts out. That is a group that has reporters in every state house in the United States. And once a week, Chris talks about the news of the day, but he also features one important story that has been a state's newsroom report, and is here to talk with us today. Hello, Chris. How are you?
I'm well. How about you, Joan?
I'm peachy. I am absolutely peachy. Yes, peachy is good. So what have you got for us today?
Well, pretty timely. Today we have an interview with our amazing Ohio reporter, Megan Henry, who is right there and just spent a lot of time in Springfield talking to the community and the Haitians. You'll recall the Supreme Court has agreed to let Trump revoke the temporary protected status to all the Haitians in our country who were allowed in when they were in danger in Haiti. And it's really extraordinary. There's about 30,000 in central Ohio. There's 15,000 in Springfield, Ohio alone. And we all remember during the 2024 campaign, Vance and Trump were claiming just insanely that these Haitians were stealing pets and eating them. You remember that whole
eating the cats
whole thing,
and eating the dogs.
The cats and dogs.
Yes.
And it was so ludicrous then. Still lying now. The Haitians are now being required, the ones just in Springfield, not anywhere else in Ohio. They're targeting Springfield. They're being required to report to ICE offices and wear ankle monitors like they're criminals.
Oh, my God.
Under house arrest. And they're trying to get them all the ones in Springfield to wear ankle monitors. The business community in Springfield, by and large, is upset and panicked because there's so many great workers among those Haitians. Governor Mike DeWine, to his credit, a Republican and had been a Trump supporter, and I suppose still is, I'm not sure, has spoken out forcefully and tried to talk Trump out of this, but to no avail. And so the whole city is sort of on this heightened, panicked alert, waiting for this mass sort of arrest of all these Haitians, and they're actually now forcing them to come in or getting them to come in and wear these ankle monitors. It's sort of just the latest of this insane, immigration, the deportation, the extreme agenda to just come into communities and take people, most of whom have no criminal record. You know, for all the talk about the worst of the worst, these are folks who are working hard in businesses and are have helped turn a town around that was struggling, and now they're all going to be, at some point, the fear is they're all going to be taken away en masse, and it's not clear what's going to happen to Springfield.
I know. And it's a real bait and switch, isn't it, for these people?
Absolutely. Think about if your country was war torn with drug lords and you and your kids weren't safe, and the government of the United States says, come here because that's our country's history, so allow people in and allow them to start a better life and contribute to our country. And you come here several years ago and you build a life, you become part of the community, you get a job, you behave yourself, you don't do anything wrong, and you're building a family. Many of those people came over here and then had children here. I think there's at least 1,000 children that were born to Haitian parents who came over here because they thought they were going to be here because they're working hard. And now all of a sudden they're told you have to come in, you have to wear an ankle bracelet, and at any time we're going to gather you all up and send you back to Haiti, where, by the way, things are not much better.
Yeah. And we did this with people from Venezuela as well. Right. They had temporary protected status, which means they're not in this country illegally. And then Donald Trump wakes up one morning and says, that TPS, that temporary protected status, yeah, you know what? I don't like that. It's gone. I'm pulling the plug on it. So somebody who was on a Monday in this country legally on Tuesday was in the country illegally and through no fault of their own.
You still there, Jen?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Oh, sorry. I can hear you now. Sorry. Right. Yeah, it just changes overnight. I was just, there are apparently more than 200 gangs in Haiti. There's almost 6,000 people that were killed here in Haiti. Children are targeted. These people came over here to be part of the American dream and are working hard, aren't committing crimes. They were scapegoated in an election. I don't think it's an accident that they have darker skin. And here we are. We are literally going to devastate a town, much less the individual people, families, parents, children. It really makes no sense. How can you tell somebody to follow the rules? They uproot their whole life, build a life, and then you change the rules because you don't like people from other countries. And you're going to devastate a community. I mean, there are a lot of people. The town of Springfield is going to suffer as well as these people directly.
Absolutely. And even when the Republican lawmakers complain about this, it doesn't seem to have any impact on what the White House says and does. It's almost like Donald Trump doesn't care about them. Huh.
No, I think it's Donald Trump and Stephen Miller. And, it's probably not a coincidence that at the last polls I've seen show Sherrod Brown significantly ahead. I do think people in larger Ohio have woken up a little bit, and I don't think the majority of people in Ohio support sending back these folks who have worked hard to become part of the community and endured racism, obviously, during the campaign and threats. And even with all that, they're still working hard, trying to become part of a community, and they're going to have literally their lives, ripped apart because of Trump and Stephen Miller deciding that what was our nation's policy overnight, as you mentioned, is no longer a policy. And now they're having to walk around as common criminals, as if they're, bank robbers or violent criminals, and wear, ankle bracelets.
And, Ohio has become a much more conservative state than it used to be. But the people of Springfield, I've read, are up in arms over this. They have embraced these Haitians into their community, and they like them and they value them, which, is saying a lot, because as you pointed out, there's quite a skin color difference here. Right.
Absolutely. And I'm not sure what's going to happen to these kids who are in school in Springfield. I think there's more than 1,000 of them in school. What's going to happen to the parents? Are they going to be separated from their kids? We don't know. It's really, and this is going to happen in other states too. It's interesting to me that the only place that we know of right now where they're forcing them to come in and wear these ankle monitors and surrender their passports and all the rest of it is Springfield. I don't know what it is about Republicans in Springfield and what it is about Vance and Trump in Springfield, but it's really it's one of the more astonishing things, and it just these things just keep happening. Our reporter has done a great job covering this and does a good job explaining it on the podcast, but there really is no rational explanation other than we don't want the country. We want the country to look a certain way, despite how well these people are doing and how much they're contributing to our communities.
Yeah. And your reporter on this, I believe, is Megan Henry.
That's right.
As with most reporters, they've learned that the best way to illustrate a story is to tell a personal account. Is there a story of a particular family or a particular individual that you can share with us? I don't have one off the top of my head other than, you remember early on in the immigration battle, there was a chaplain who was imprisoned in Ohio and was detained, and we wrote extensively about him. Megan was actually just in Springfield. She has a story posted this morning about the Springfield community, about the people who work with the folks in Springfield who are trying to help them. The Haitians a lot of them are actually scared to talk. Mm-hmm. The message sort of going through her story is that people were completely panicked and worried about what's next, and sort of walking on eggshells, worried about coming out of the house. How are they going to go to work? There was one 16-year-old in Pittsburgh that wasn't in Ohio, but was forced to wear an ankle monitor for doing nothing but just growing up. So it is really. We are really getting into the places where you wonder, everybody, wonders how long this can go on and what's going to happen. I do think that, again, that it has to account for part of the reason that you mentioned Ohio's gotten to be a conservative state, and it's been a long time since Democrats won in Ohio. But if the polls are to be believed, Sherrod Brown is significantly ahead, and the governor's race is at least a toss-up. And I've seen polls with Amy Acton slightly ahead.
So this is going to be a really interesting. Everything contributes to this. I think the war, the gas prices, all the things that you talk about every week. But I think this in Ohio specifically is a really big deal. Can you imagine living in a neighborhood, knowing people, have coworkers who are Haitian, and then you hear who became the vice president of the United States claiming that they were eating pets. It's so just ridiculous.
Yeah, and when when his feet were really held to the fire, he was like, well, I understand it didn't really happen, but it was like a good anecdote, or it was a good metaphor, a good illustration. So J.D. Vance knew when he was saying this that it was nonsense.
Right. And obviously from Ohio now. So, it's astonishing. But Megan does a really good job talking about this story and what people face. It's very depressing.
Talking with Chris Fitzsimon, Stories from the States is the podcast. We're going to take a break and be back with more after this.
Because facts matter. You are listening to WCPT 820. Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Chris Fitzsimon is here. He's telling us about the Stories from the States podcast. This week's podcast is focusing on the Haitians in Springfield, Ohio, and what is happening to them. Chris Mallory also reached out to me and said that one of the things that you could talk about, and I want to make sure I've got this right, companies that benefit from increased immigration enforcement. That's the opposite of what I've been hearing. So tell me what that's all about.
I'm sorry, Jen, I couldn't hear the beginning of your question. Sorry about that.
Okay. Mallory suggested that one thing we talk about is the companies who are benefiting from increased immigration enforcement.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, that's a whole sort of another interesting story where there are all these you probably have talked about or have heard about. I think we may have even talked about before, Core Civic, which is a prison company, which is building detention centers for undocumented folks who are being rounded up and held, and in many cases with terrible conditions. There's been a lot of publicity about how they're being treated. Core Civic is about to open a giant, we broke the story this past week in Tennessee, a giant 24-hour call center where all sorts of people can call and talk about immigrants and check on immigrants and turn in immigrants. That is now in a rural part of Tennessee. That's a big debate there. So all over the country, there are all these people cashing in. And the craziest one to me, I don't know if you have already mentioned this, but for a while, the Trump administration ended funding for immigrant children for legal representation when they had to go before an immigration judge to find out what their status was. Then at the last minute, he gave a big award to a small law firm in Texas that had never done immigration law before. They quickly put an immigration thing on their website, so they're making a ton of money with no experience. Ugh. So at the same time that we're doing these terrible things to people and that we're ruining communities, we're sort of doling out cash with no bid contracts to build facilities, to build call centers, to give lawyers money who are supportive. And the Trump firm is a big Trump supporting law firm. It's been reported. We've been reporting. People have been reporting. So there's a sick sort of profit motive at the same time. Ooh is probably the mildest reaction I could have. Yeah. It's really, there's the terrible policy. There's the inhumaneness of it all. There's the rupturing families, breaking up families, ruining communities. And then there are people who are getting wealthy off of it. And it's really something.
And I've read reporting for years about activists who want to get rid of the whole idea of privately owned prisons, prisons for profit. It's been documented over and over again that how do you make a profit with prisons? Well, you cut medical staff. You serve lower quality food. I mean, it's a recipe that's pretty clear how you make a profit over private prisons. It ain't a good idea, and I wish there was a ban on it completely.
Well, and also, if you build a private prison, they only make money if their beds are full. Mm-hmm. So what kind of message does that send to policymakers? And all these prisons, all these private prison companies, CoreCivic included, have lobbyists, and they claim they're not trying to influence the laws, but their profit depends on how many people go to jail or go to prison. The other big thing you probably talked about, which is I'm still trying to get over it, which is along these lines, which we talked about this week. We reported this week, talked about it some on the podcast, is the $20 million no-bid contract to give ICE agent electric shock gloves.
Oh, God, yes.
That's a Kentucky company.
That's Susan Collins, who's running for re-election. That's one of the issues she's been hit with, because she always votes to increase or repeat the funding for ICE. And the idea there, these electric shock gloves, it's supposed to be, it's a less lethal way to maintain order, Chris. You do understand that, right?
I mean, it's insane. Yeah, that's the justification is they killed people in Minnesota and other places. Now they're just going to, I guess, render them immobile and hurt them with gloves. Can you imagine? This is like out of some weird dystopian science fiction movie.
Oh, I mean,
that's the point that we've gotten to in this country, which is really, I don't know how we got here, but the thought that there'll be law enforcement people walking around with these, like it's like something out of a horror movie to me.
It is out of a horror movie, and I love to read science fiction, but I never read dystopian science fiction because it just gives me the creeps. And now the world is so much more dystopian than any of those novels I refused to read.
Yeah, you do wonder where it all ends and what's going to happen if the Democrats do take over one or both chambers of Congress or houses of Congress, and what happens to the funding. And, no matter what Susan Collins says, the folks who voted for all this are the ones who have enabled it. I'm just scared about what comes next. So we have a law firm who doesn't have any experience representing kids. We have shock gloves. We're yanking people out and putting ankle bracelets on people, eventually going to send them back to a country where their lives are in danger, take them away from their kids. That's a week's news. Any one of these things would have been a dominant story in the news for 6 months in any other era.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, one of the things I know you've been following is the primary election in our neighbor, Wisconsin. Wisconsin gives us heart palpitations every time there's an election. It's just so stressful here in Illinois as we watch what's going to happen now, because in Wisconsin, anything can happen. What did you think about the most recent primary results?
Well, the first thing I thought, both in Wisconsin this week and then Michigan before that, was that the pollsters now, for the most part, have no idea. I mean, we've known that for a while, but Francesca Hong, who's a DSA candidate for governor, was significantly ahead in most of the polls. And El Sayed in Michigan, who did win narrowly, but he was ahead by double digits and barely won. I think what I made out of Wisconsin is that there's a lot of things. One is the a lot of people think that the rise of the DSA is some anti-establishment vote, and that's happening everywhere, and that this means that's not happening. I think what you can draw from this is two things. One is Francesca Hong might not have been as good a candidate as some other folks that are in the progressive side, and that Tony Evers, the governor of Wisconsin, is actually very popular, even though he's an older guy, which is some of this is generational. I think people in Wisconsin are generally happy with how he's governed, and he came back and strongly, not only publicly supported David Crowley, who won the nomination, who will be the first black governor of Wisconsin if he wins from Milwaukee, but he also directed some resources to him, and that was all in the last couple of weeks. It was almost like they had several elections. I mean, 2 elections in one. So I think it was fascinating, and I did see what the most interesting thing to me, which is just a minor thing, but a lot of talk in Michigan about can the Democrats reunite. In Wisconsin, there was a photo going around social media of all the Democrats who won their primary races and the losers sitting around a table having a meal. So Crowley was sitting with Francesca Hong and some other folks trying to figure out already the day after the election how they were going to win how they were going to win the general election. So it's really interesting. It is it's the closest race in the country. Yeah, me too.
Francesca Hong, she was right there. And I mean, it must have been, well, I don't know with what her private polling showed. Maybe she knew that this was going to be a squeaker and she probably or could at least possibly lose. But the fact that she was on board with Crowley so quickly and so completely, that gives me such hope for the Democratic Party.
Yep. Oh, me too. And she was, she was a longtime state legislator and very popular from Madison. I thought that was a giant thing, as you mentioned, that sends a pretty strong message now. So it's going to be really, I think Wisconsin will be it feels like now it is the swingiest of the swing states, and the other thing, I think there is a lot of pundits will say that if the Democrats can hold the governor's mansion, that they might have a trifecta there and take over the state house and the state senate, which would be astonishing when you think about it. Wasn't that many years ago when Scott Walker was there and all the lines were redrawn and they gerrymandered the maps and people thought it was Wisconsin will be Republican forever in the legislature. All that is now up for grabs. Part of that is because of organizing and efforts. Part of that, though, I think is actually because of the direction that the Republicans have gone nationally and how the people in Wisconsin have a hard time defending that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you mentioned Tony Evers. Yes, he is old. And I know right now we're in a changed mindset, and especially older folks who are in office. But to me, Tony Evers is the exception to that rule. Chris, he seems like Walter Cronkite to me. He seems he's somebody you feel safe with. He's never going to lead you astray. He's going to be kind, and he's only going to tell you the truth. Is that just me, do you think?
No, I think that is, and people trust him. And goodness gracious, if there's a time when we want somebody that we can trust, who's, for lack of a better word, sort of normal, even though he's very progressive. It really does feel like that's part of, I think, what's happening there. People are yearning for a calm, I think, much, a different direction than we're in now. And, we've talked so far today, we've talked about, ripping families apart, electric shock gloves, and Tony Evers just keeps plugging along in Wisconsin and governing effectively. And he's very popular. He's a two-term governor. So his word and his mantle there, I think, went a long way toward deciding this election and keeping people in Wisconsin together.
Yeah, I think so, too. He's a rare politician that way, and he's never given people any reason to look askance at him or to doubt him, and I like that. I like that very much. Mr. Fitzsimon, your podcast, Stories from the States, is going to be airing here on WCPT, also on the other station we own, AM 950, Twin Cities, Minnesota. Congratulations. That? You are going to be... When does it... I'm trying to read. I got the announcement, and I saved it for our discussion. I can't...
I'm
when
trying
does
to figure
it start?
It out.
Has it already started?
Coming up next week. No, I think it's next week.
Starting August 16th. There you go.
There you go. Well, it's this week's. It's next week, but it's this week's episode. That's right.
Yes. And so here on WCPT or heartlandsignal.com, it is going to be airing Sundays at 6 p.m. And in Minnesota, you are going to be, now you have a little bit of a schedule change. Through August, the show is going to be on Sunday at 11:30 in the morning, but then starting September, it will be Sunday at 11 a.m. Do you write all this down? Do you know this? You've got to be talking about this.
I do have this all written down. It is exciting, though. I'm very thrilled that we're expanding our partnership with Heartland Signal. Very excited about that.
Yes, it's going to be terrific. So it starts this Sunday, the 16th.
Sunday, right.
And is the episode we have been talking about today the one that's going to be airing?
Yes, indeed, with Megan Henry and these topics about people getting rich off of immigration, and then a look at the week in the election. And then we always have one sort of bizarre story of the week that our newsletter authors come up with in our discussion. So I won't tell you what that is. It's always an interesting and more lighthearted thing, because if you talked about all that stuff the whole time, I don't know what we would all do. But
hey, I hear you. You know, we have every Thursday, we're joined by one of the reporters for Heartland Signal, Rich Eberwein. because Heartland Signal reports stories that aren't always talked about on the radio side. So I have him come in once a week so he can bring us 3 stories we might otherwise have missed. And for the last several months, I have been beating him up one side and down the other to make sure that when at all possible, we end on either a story with a silver lining or a high note. And, he can't always do it, but he gives it his best. And that's so important, I think, because, yes, everything is really, really bad and tense right now. But if you don't alleviate the gloom and doom once in a while, you're going to lose a lot of people.
But don't you think I completely agree with that? But I sort of think that we're in this era is in a tailspin. The question will be how much damage will be done before it's over. But I think other people are going to soon have control of, or have some of the controls in their hands, and we might be pulling out of this. It's just going to matter how fast and what damage is done before that happens.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Chris, I will be looking forward to you on heartlandsignal.com, WCPT AM 820, this coming Sunday at 6 p.m. And on our station, that's the time it's always going to be. If you're in Minnesota, it's going to move around a little bit, but here it's not. Chris, thanks so much for being here.
Absolutely. Talk to you soon.